It was a sunny summer afternoon at the pool at the local community pool until an encounter changed everything. A white woman confronted a black teenager at the gate to ask for his rights. His is there. The exchange quickly escalated, attracting viewers' attention as Sarah Johnson's voice and tension filled the air. The scene played out like a courtroom drama, but then the atmosphere changed. A shiny black car appeared and attracted attention immediately when the door opened. The identity of the person who stepped out was shocking. The wave that passed through the crowd left everyone speechless. What happened next would not only redefine that day, but challenge perception in a way that no one could have foreseen. Stay tuned to witness how this encounter takes a powerful turn that you won't want to miss. Like this video, share with others, and don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell for more impactful stories. Marcus Lee, a 12-year-old with a calm and confident demeanor, had recently moved to the neighborhood with his mother, Governor Alicia Lee. Marcus was a thoughtful and respectful teenager, known for his friendly nature and natural athleticism. Despite his quiet demeanor, Marcus had an infectious energy that easily drew others in. The move to the new neighborhood represented more than just a change of scenery for him. It was an opportunity for a fresh start, a chance to build new friendships, and to enjoy the simple joys of adolescence in a welcoming community. Governor Alicia Lee, Marcus's mother, was a trailblazing leader admired for her unwavering commitment to fairness, justice, and inclusion. Her reputation extended far beyond her office, as she was celebrated for championing policies that fostered equality and opportunity for all. The decision to move to the new neighborhood was as much about offering Marcus a peaceful, supportive environment as it was about staying connected to the community she served. For Marcus, the new chapter in his life seemed promising. He looked forward to carefree summer days at the pool and forging connections with his neighbors. Yet, despite the optimism surrounding the move, neither Marcus nor his mother could have anticipated the challenges that would soon arise and test their resilience in unexpected ways. On a warm summer afternoon, the community pool bustled with laughter, splashes, and the carefree sounds of families enjoying the day. Among the crowd sat Margaret Benson, a longtime resident, with a reputation for keeping a close eye on the neighborhood. Known for her meticulous attention to detail and strong opinions about who belonged, Margaret was seated in her usual spot near the pool's entrance. Her sharp gaze scanned the area, eventually landing on Marcus Lee, a 12-year-old boy she didn't recognize. Marcus had just entered the pool area with a towel slung over his shoulder and an eager smile, ready for his first swim since moving to the neighborhood with his mother, Governor Alicia Lee. He was excited to explore one of the community's most popular spots and make the most of the sunny day. Yet, Margaret's watchful demeanor quickly shifted to suspicion. To her, the sight of an unfamiliar face was cause for concern. As Marcus placed his things on a lounge chair and prepared to step toward the pool, Margaret stood up, her expression firm. She approached him with an air of authority, her posture stiff and unyielding. "Excuse me, young man," she began, her voice carrying the sharp tone of someone accustomed to being listened to. "Who are you? And what are you doing here?" Startled but polite, Marcus turned to face her. "Hi, ma'am," he replied respectfully. "I'm Marcus. My mom and I just moved here a few weeks ago. I'm here to swim." Margaret narrowed her eyes, her skepticism growing. "Moved here? Where exactly?" she pressed. "I've lived in this neighborhood for over 20 years, and I don't recall seeing you before." Marcus hesitated briefly, caught off guard by her intensity. "We live just down the street on Maple Drive," he said. "This is my first time at the pool." Her expression hardened further, and she folded her arms tightly across her chest. "This pool is for residents only," she said firmly. "If you're new here, you should have no problem showing proof that you live in the neighborhood." Confused by the sudden demand, Marcus tried to explain. "I didn't bring any ID," he said. "I just came to swim. I didn't think I'd need anything else." Margaret's tone grew sharper. "If you're really a resident, then you should have a pool pass or some form of identification," she insisted. "Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Around them, the lively atmosphere of the pool began to shift. The chatter and laughter softened as more people turned their attention to the exchange. Parents whispered to each other, and a few children paused their play to glance over. The lifeguards seated at their stations looked on uneasily, clearly aware of the growing tension but hesitant to intervene. Marcus, sensing the weight of the moment, took a deep breath and tried to maintain his composure. "Ma'am, I'm not here to cause any trouble," he said calmly. "I'm just here to enjoy the pool, like everyone else." But Margaret was relentless. "Then prove it," she shot back. "If you can't show me that you belong here, I'll have no choice but to get the pool management or even security involved." Marcus glanced around, hoping someone might step in or speak up on his behalf, but the bystanders, though visibly uncomfortable, remained silent. The lifeguards exchanged uneasy glances but stayed seated, their reluctance to get involved palpable. The growing murmur among the crowd only heightened the tension as Margaret's demands became louder and more insistent. Despite the frustration and humiliation building within him, Marcus stood his ground. "I live here, and I'm not trespassing," he said firmly, his voice steady. "I just want to swim." Margaret's response was immediate and dismissive. "Then show me you belong here," she repeated, her voice rising. "Otherwise you have no business being here." The confrontation, which had started as a private exchange, was now a public spectacle. The weight of Margaret's unyielding scrutiny bore down on Marcus, while the crowd's silence only amplified the tension. For Marcus, the simple joy of a summer afternoon at the pool had transformed into an ordeal he never expected, a moment that revealed the biases and assumptions that could turn even the most mundane interactions into battles of dignity and belonging. As the summer sun cast a golden glow over the pool area, the joyful sounds of splashing and laughter gradually faded, replaced by a thick silence that hung over the confrontation. Marcus Lee stood firm, his hands at his sides, as Margaret Benson pressed him relentlessly with questions. Her tone was sharp, her words laced with suspicion, and her posture radiated an air of authority she had claimed for herself. To her, Marcus was an unfamiliar face, and that alone seemed to justify her interrogation. "I'm telling you the truth," Marcus said, calmly, his voice steady despite the growing tension. "I live in this neighborhood with my mom. We moved here recently." But Margaret wasn't satisfied. Her arms remained tightly crossed as she tilted her head, narrowing her eyes at him. "If that's true," she said, her tone edged with skepticism, "then why don't you have proof? No ID, no pool pass. That doesn't sound like someone who belongs here." Around them, the once lively atmosphere of the pool had shifted. Parents lounging on deck chairs exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. Some whispered among themselves, their eyes flickering toward Marcus and Margaret, then quickly away. Children who had been playing in the shallow end paused, their cheerful shouts replaced by hushed voices as they watched the scene unfold. Even the lifeguards, perched high on their stands, seemed paralyzed, their attention fixed on the growing conflict but unwilling to intervene. Marcus, feeling the weight of the stares around him, took a deep breath to steady himself. He refused to let Margaret see his frustration or the sting of humiliation her words caused. "I didn't think I needed proof just to swim," he said. "I came straight from school, and I left my things at home." Margaret's response was swift and cutting. "Well, that's not my problem," she snapped. "If you live here, you should be able to prove it. Until you can, you don't have any right to use this pool." The murmurs among the bystanders grew louder, but still, no one stepped forward. The lifeguards exchanged uneasy glances, their nervous shifting betraying their awareness of the growing tension. Yet none of them climbed down from their posts to mediate the situation. Their silence spoke volumes, a quiet complicity that added to the weight of the moment. Marcus looked around, his eyes scanning the faces of the onlookers, hoping for anyone to step in. A few parents seemed visibly uncomfortable, their brows furrowed in disapproval, but they remained rooted in their spots. Some fidgeted awkwardly with their phones or pretended to be absorbed in their books, as though avoiding eye contact might absolve them of responsibility. The silence was deafening, a collective decision to do nothing that only emboldened Margaret further. Sensing the lack of opposition, her voice grew louder, carrying an air of triumph. "If you can't prove you live here," she declared, pointing toward the pool gate, "then I suggest you leave before I call security." Marcus clenched his fists at his sides, his frustration mounting. He had done nothing wrong, yet here he was, being singled out and humiliated in front of an entire crowd. He wanted to shout, to demand why no one was speaking up, but he knew better. Raising his voice or showing anger would only give Margaret more ammunition. Instead, he held his ground, his voice firm but controlled. "I'm not leaving," he said. "This is my community too." Margaret scoffed, her lips curling into a smirk. "Not without proof it isn't," she said, reaching for her phone. "If you won't leave, I'll make sure someone comes to deal with you." As she began dialing, the tension reached its breaking point. The murmurs among the crowd turned into audible whispers. "Should we do something?" one parent muttered to another. "This doesn't seem right," someone else whispered. But no one moved, no one stepped forward. The lifeguards remained frozen, their gazes darting nervously between Margaret and Marcus. For Marcus, the silence was as loud as any accusation. It wasn't just Margaret's words that cut deep, it was the inaction of the people around him, their unwillingness to stand up and say, "This isn't right." Their silence felt like an endorsement of Margaret's behavior, a validation of the assumptions she had made about him based on nothing more than his presence. As Margaret continued her tirade, the weight of the moment bore down on Marcus. His mind raced, searching for a way to resolve the situation without escalating it further. He reached for his phone, his hands trembling slightly, and began typing a message to his mother. "Mom, can you come to the pool? There's a problem." The seconds felt like hours as he waited for a response. Around him the crowd remained motionless, their unease palpable, but their silence unbroken. Marcus stood alone, the center of attention, in a spectacle he had never wanted, a stark reminder of the biases and assumptions that still lingered in the community. As Margaret lowered her phone, her expression triumphant, the crowd's collective inaction hung heavy in the air. Marcus swallowed hard, refusing to let his frustration show. He wouldn't let her see him falter. But inside, he couldn't help but wonder why no one had spoken up. Why the people who had watched the entire exchange unfold had chosen to stay silent. That silence, as much as Margaret's words, was what hurt the most. The quiet tension around the pool was suddenly disrupted by the hum of a sleek black luxury car pulling up just beyond the gate. Its polished exterior gleamed in the sunlight, drawing the eyes of every onlooker. The scene, which moments earlier had been dominated by Margaret Benson's sharp accusations and the crowd's uneasy silence, now felt as though it had paused in anticipation. All heads turned as the car door opened, revealing Governor Alicia Lee stepping out with a calm yet commanding presence that immediately shifted the energy in the air. Dressed impeccably in her work attire, Governor Lee carried herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that mattered. The rhythmic click of her heels on the pavement was the only sound as she approached the pool deck, her expression steady but unyielding. Her gaze swept across the crowd before settling on her son Marcus, who stood at the center of the commotion, with his phone still in hand, his composure beginning to falter under the weight of Margaret's relentless scrutiny. Without hesitation, Governor Lee placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. Her presence alone seemed to lift some of the weight off him, replacing his visible distress with a glimmer of hope. She turned to address the small crowd that had gathered, her voice calm yet firm, cutting through the murmurs and silencing the last whispers. "What seems to be the problem here?" she asked, her eyes locking onto Margaret, whose confident demeanor wavered for the first time. Margaret took a step back, her expression shifting to one of uncertainty. I didn't realize he was your son," she stammered, struggling to regain her footing. I was just trying to make sure everything was in order." Governor Lee raised an eyebrow, her tone sharp but measured. "In order?" she repeated. "And what exactly gave you the authority to interrogate a teenager at a public pool? My son is a resident of this neighborhood and he has every right to be here without being harassed." The security guards who had arrived moments before the governor straightened up immediately, their discomfort evident. One of them attempted to explain, "Governor Lee, we were just responding to a call. There was a concern." "A concern about what?" Governor Lee interrupted, her voice now carrying an unmistakable edge. "A teenager swimming in his community pool. Did you ask for his side of the story, or did you simply act on an assumption based on someone else's complaint?" Her words resonated across the pool deck, and the crowd's silence grew heavier. Margaret, now visibly trembling, tried to speak again, but the governor's piercing gaze stopped her mid-sentence. Turning back to the guards, Governor Lee added, "This pool, like every other part of this state, is governed by laws against discrimination. My son deserves the same respect and freedom as everyone else here. Am I understood?" The guards nodded quickly, muttering apologies as Margaret shrank further into the background. Governor Lee's commanding presence had not only dismantled the accusations, but had also forced the community to confront the underlying biases that had fueled the incident. As Governor Alicia Lee stepped forward, the once commanding demeanor of Margaret Benson began to crumble. The governor's piercing gaze swept over Margaret and the security guards, her presence alone carrying the weight of authority and justice. Standing beside her son Marcus, she addressed the group with a calm but unmistakable firmness. "What exactly is going on here?" she asked, her voice cutting through the heavy silence that hung over the pool. Margaret, who had moments ago been brimming with confidence, stammered in response. "I didn't mean any harm," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't recognize him and wanted to make sure he was supposed to be here." Governor Lee raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by the explanation. "Didn't recognize him," she repeated, her tone sharp. "And that alone justified singling him out, questioning him and escalating this to the point of calling security? My son has every right to be here, just like everyone else." The security guards, now visibly uncomfortable, shifted nervously. One stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Governor Lee, we were responding to a report. We didn't mean to cause any distress." Governor Lee's eyes narrowed. "A report about what, exactly? A teenager swimming in his own community pool? Did you stop to question why the report was made or consider the possibility of bias before acting on it?" The guards exchanged uneasy glances, clearly recognizing the truth in her words. "We apologize, ma'am," one of them said, his voice subdued. "We handled this poorly." Satisfied but unrelenting, Governor Lee turned back to Margaret. "I suggest you take a moment to reflect on why you felt the need to escalate this situation. From where I stand, this looks far less like concern and far more like prejudice." Margaret's face flushed red as she avoided the governor's gaze, her confidence shattered. Governor Lee's unwavering composure had exposed the bias and unfairness at the heart of the confrontation. As the confrontation drew to a close, the atmosphere around the pool shifted once more, this time to one of reflection and unease. Governor Alicia Lee's commanding words lingered in the air, prompting a ripple of discomfort among the onlookers. What had started as a silent crowd now began to stir, many realizing the weight of their inaction during the incident. One of the security guards, his face etched with regret, stepped forward. "Governor Lee, I want to apologize," he said, his voice sincere but heavy. "We mishandled this situation. We should have listened to your son and approached this differently." The second guard nodded in agreement, adding, "We'll review our protocols to ensure this doesn't happen again. We're truly sorry for the distress caused." Governor Lee acknowledged their apologies with a firm nod, but her gaze remained steady. "Apologies are a start," she replied, "but what matters most is learning from this and taking action to ensure fairness and respect for everyone in this community." The quiet murmur of agreement began to grow among the poolgoers. A parent sitting nearby, visibly uncomfortable, finally spoke up. "I should have stepped in earlier," they admitted, their voice tinged with guilt. "I saw what was happening, but I stayed quiet. I'm sorry, Marcus." Another bystander chimed in, their tone filled with remorse. "No one should have to go through something like this just to enjoy a day at the pool. We let it go too far." As these voices of regret emerged, others began to nod and murmur in agreement. The crowd, once silent and passive, was now grappling with the realization of their complicity. Even the lifeguard, who had remained stationary throughout the ordeal, climbed down from their post and approached Governor Lee. "I should have done something," they admitted. "This is on me too. I'll make sure no one else ever has to face this kind of treatment again." Governor Lee looked around at the gathering, her expression firm yet hopeful. "Acknowledging the issue is the first step," she said. "But change requires action. We all have a responsibility to speak up against injustice and ensure this community is a place where everyone feels safe and welcome." The collective reflection left an indelible mark on the community, planting seeds of accountability and the need for change. Governor Alicia Lee stood at the center of the poolside gathering, her calm yet commanding presence drawing the attention of everyone around her. The confrontation had ended, but she knew the moment called for more than resolution. It demanded reflection and change. With her son Marcus by her side, she addressed the crowd, her voice steady yet filled with conviction. "This incident is more than just a misunderstanding," she began, her gaze sweeping across the group of poolgoers, security guards and bystanders. "It is a stark reminder of the biases that can shape our actions and the silence that allows those biases to persist. Discrimination, whether overt or subtle, has no place here or anywhere." Her words resonated deeply, prompting the onlookers to lower their eyes in quiet contemplation. "It's not enough to simply avoid doing harm," Governor Lee continued. "We have a responsibility to actively stand against injustice when we see it. Silence enables situations like this to unfold. Action prevents them." The crowd nodded in agreement, visibly moved by her message. A few clapped softly, their small gestures signaling their support. Governor Lee concluded with a firm but hopeful tone. "This is a teachable moment for all of us. Let's commit to creating a community where everyone is treated with respect, dignity, and fairness. Together, we can ensure that this kind of situation doesn't happen again." Her words left a lasting impression, transforming the incident into a catalyst for growth and unity. As the late afternoon sun began to set, Marcus Lee and his mother, Governor Alicia Lee, walked side by side toward their car. The tension of the day was fading, replaced by a quiet sense of pride and resilience. Marcus, who had stood his ground with dignity throughout the ordeal, now carried himself with renewed confidence, bolstered by his mother's unwavering support. Governor Lee placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder as they approached the car, her calm presence a constant reminder of her strength and love. "You handled yourself with dignity today," she said softly, her voice filled with pride. "I'm proud of you." Marcus smiled, the weight of the earlier confrontation lifting as he looked back at the pool one last time. What had begun as a moment of humiliation and frustration had transformed into an opportunity for growth and unity. The community had been challenged to reflect on its biases and inaction, sparking a collective commitment to do better. The governor's powerful message and Marcus's composure had left an indelible mark on those who witnessed the incident. As they drove away, the pool was no longer just a place of confrontation. It had become a symbol of resilience and the possibility of change. The day's events, though painful, served as a catalyst for a stronger, more inclusive community, one that Marcus and his mother could be proud to call home. This story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing against injustice and fostering equality in our communities. Moments like these challenge us to reflect, take action, and create spaces where everyone feels valued and respected. Let's continue to advocate for fairness and unity, ensuring that bias and discrimination have no place in our lives. If this story resonates with you, share it with others, leave a comment, and subscribe for more impactful narratives. Together we can inspire change.